So last week we went over the first 5 amendments in the Bill of Rights. This week I'm going to do a super quick recap. So we're going to kind of just go over the whole thing until we get to the point where we left off, and then we're going to continue on and hopefully get 5 more, which will be the rest of the Bill of Rights. We're going to try to finish those up tonight. So we're just going to start here. And just, I want to kind of give everybody a basic understanding of the format of the Constitution and what that is. One of the things that some of the students didn't realize, I guess, in our last class, is that your Bill of Rights is actually part of your Constitution. The Bill of Rights is your first 10 amendments to the Constitution. So the Bill of Rights is not specifically a separate document, but people call the first 10 amendments our Bill of Rights. Now, you're going to find later on, though, as we progress, you're going to see that there are others, especially like the 14th, that may apply in instances where you're talking about your rights. And that's not really included in the Bill of Rights. It's the 14th Amendment. There's, I think, one more. So we're going to go through here. We're going to start at the beginning. And the Constitution begins with the preamble. And everybody's heard "we the people" in order to form a more perfect union. That's our preamble. And then you have Article 1 has 10 sections. Now, what Article 1 lays out is the legislative branch. So Article 1, and we're going to go back over all of these in detail at a later point, but right now we're focusing on the Bill of Rights. So I'm just kind of, like I said, giving you the layout of this stuff, and then we'll go over these in more depth later on down the road. So first we have Article 1, and that is your legislative branch. It has 10 sections, and on this paper, if you want to take a screenshot or something, I give you a little blurb about what each one of these are pertaining to the legislative branch. We have where the power is vested. We have the House of Representatives. We have the Senate. We have elections of senators and representatives. Then we have the rules of the House and Senate. We have compensation and privileges of members, passage of bills, scope of legislative power, limits on legislative power, and limits on states. Now, some people have heard me say before that, if somebody asks me why do I think this or that about the Constitution applies to me, and I've said many times it doesn't. Constitution really doesn't have anything to do with me. It wasn't set up with me. This document was not made to lay out your rights. Your rights are inherent. They come from God. This document was laid out to put limits on government. That's the whole point of the Constitution, is to draft out, this is what you're allowed to do, and everything else, all the other rights, are retained by the people. So the document kind of spells out how the government is supposed to work. So Article 1 is the legislative branch. Article 2, you can see, is the presidency. And it talks about election, installation, removal. Section 2 is presidential power. Section 3 is State of the Union. Receive ambassadors, laws faithfully executed, and commission offices. Now, where was I? Commission officers. And then Section 4 is impeachment. Article 3 deals with the judiciary. There are 3 sections to Article 3. So you have the judicial power vested, you have the scope of the judicial power, and you have treason. Article 4 is about the states. It has 4 sections. Section 1 is full faith and credit. Section 2, privileges and immunities, extradition, fugitive slaves. Section 3 is admission of states. Admission of states. Section 4 is guarantees to states. Article 5 is the amendment process. Article 6 is a legal status of the Constitution. Article 7 is on ratification. And then we have the signers. Next, we go into the amendments. And you'll see here there are 27 amendments to the Constitution. So we'll kind of go over those. And like I said, last week we went over the first 5. The first 10 are your Bill of Rights, and that's what we're going to go over today. So we're just going to jump right into that and look at those amendments today, which is commonly referred to as the Bill of Rights. Let's get down here. So, amendments, I put Bill of Rights here because that's your first 10, and these first 5 are what we went over last Zoom meeting. So I'm just gonna quickly go over the first 5 that we did last week and why this is so important. As I said, your rights are inherent. Your rights come from God. So your rights don't come from the Constitution. However, the Constitution does enumerate those rights. So we want to at least see what the Constitution has said about those rights. So the First Amendment deals with religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. And the First Amendment is one of those that gets a lot of attention and a lot of talk because there's a lot there. There's only one sentence, but boy, does it pack a wallop as far as how many rights are enumerated there. So what the First Amendment actually says is Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble, and to petition the government for redress of grievances. So a lot of people kind of focus on the freedom of speech on this one, or a lot of times peaceably assemble, but it does include also, freedom of religion, assembly, and petition. So you don't want to forget those. First Amendment, very important. Second Amendment, not much different. We only have one sentence here, but again, it packs a wallop. So the Second Amendment is the right to bear arms. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And we see that being infringed all the time in this country, but we also see a lot of deception in this area about these rights. Now, we need to keep in mind that anything that is repugnant to the Constitution is null and void. If it's not in line with the Constitution, in other words, if it's contrary to the Constitution, in other words, they infringe your right to keep and to bear those arms, like the Brady Bill, which isn't really even lawful if you look at it, because it infringes on your right to keep and bear arms. And an interesting thing about that Brady Bill, that is the bill, for those of you who don't know, that was established when Ronald Reagan, there was an attempted assassination on Ronald Reagan, and one of his agents was shot in that. His name was Brady, his last name was Brady, and the bill was named after him. Now, this is the bill that when they tried to foist this on the people, even though it's repugnant to the Constitution and would therefore be null and void, they tried to foist it on the people, and they contacted all the sheriffs and said, you have to run checks on your people. What the Brady Bill says is that they have to run checks on you and make sure you don't have any criminal history, and there's a waiting period and that kind of stuff. And when that happened, they first told the sheriffs that they had to run the checks. And that's when Sheriff Mack sued the Clinton administration. And his lawsuit was saying, I'm a sheriff. I was elected by the people to uphold the Constitution, and this infringes the right to keep and bear arms. I'm not going to run checks on my civilians. And so at that point, he actually won. And the only reason that we have those checks today is because the government turned around and told the retailers, okay, we passed this law, so now you have to run these checks. Well, if the retailers had done what Sheriff Mack did and said, look, that's not our job to run checks. We're not, government agents. We don't work for you. You're not, we don't have a contract with you. This thing violates the Constitution and you can't make us do that. If they'd have stood up, we wouldn't even have any checks today. But none of them stood up. So they just allow this fraud to happen. It's actually unconstitutional, as you can see right here, that your right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And to run a check on me and decide whether you think I'm worthy or not is an infringement on my right to keep and bear arms. To tell me that I need a concealed carry license to carry my arms is an infringement on my right to bear those arms. So this is why we need to know our Constitution, and we need to know something about the Supreme Court rulings that back up the Constitution, and why we all need to be active in what happens in our government. Okay, any questions? All right, unless y'all interrupt me, I'm just going to keep rolling. Our Third Amendment, quartering of troops. No soldier shall, in time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. So, in other words, military troops can't just come in and take over your house and commandeer your home unless it's in a time of war and only in a manner prescribed by law. And I don't think that's happened since the Civil War. Some history buffs may want to correct me if there's been a rare instance here or there, but I haven't really heard of it. Okay, the Fourth Amendment, search and seizure. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Now, again, very important amendment. This has been violated from one end to the other in our country. And number one, until the people know the law, which our Constitution is the foundation of law in this country. Until we know this stuff, by actually reading it, not listening to what somebody else says about it, but actually reading it like we are here, then we're going to continue to be victims of the system. We have to be a more educated public. And it starts right here. There's a couple of really important things in here that people miss a lot. And it gets a lot of people in a lot of trouble. If we look here at shall be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures, shall not be violated. That happens all the time. And there could be some debate about what's unreasonable, but there have been plenty of Supreme Court rulings that back up the people's right to be left alone and to not to be infringed upon. But here's another really important thing, especially if you have any kind of legal issue. Because no warrant shall issue but upon, and now this says no warrants. None. Period. Of any kind. The word N-O means none. No warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation. Now, here's where we get to the tricky part. Oath or affirmation. What you're going to find a lot of times, and I was teaching a woman one day who had worked in a DA's office for 8 years. And when she really got what I was teaching her, her eyes got big as silver dollars. Her jaw dropped and she couldn't even believe it. She said, "Oh my God, you mean all that time I was committing a fraud and I was breaking the law?" And I said, "Absolutely." What they had her in there doing was signing complaints. A complaint can only be signed by an injured party, not by a DA's assistant or a clerk in the DA's office. And she said, "I sat and signed complaints all day long." The complaint is supposed to be signed by the victim. That complaint is then taken to a judge who looks at that, takes the affirmation, which is that complaint, which is in the form of an affidavit, takes that, and the judge issues the warrant. Now, many times what we see happening is judges issue warrants not on an oath or affirmation, but on what's called an information and belief. And this is what police officers generally file. It's called an information or belief. Sometimes they'll even file what's called a complaint. But according to the law, if the officer is not the victim, he can't file a complaint. He has no complaint. He's the officer. The person that has a complaint would be the victim. And so this is where people get fooled a lot, because there'll be no victim, which means there was no complaint to start with, but yet a cop submits an information and belief, and maybe even his own complaint, which is invalid if he's not a victim. If he doesn't have a valid complaint, he can't file a complaint. Court doesn't take a complaint on behalf of somebody else unless you're an attorney. You can file a complaint on behalf of your client, but you can't just file a complaint when you haven't been the victim of a crime or had a contract broken. So this is where they give people the okey doke an awful lot. And these like municipal judges and stuff like that, if you don't hold them to account, they will try to issue their little warrants without any oath or affirmation. I've seen it happen many, many times. And then when they do issue a warrant, they have to describe the exact place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So if when some kind of criminal complaint is supposedly brought against you, if there's no real complaint supported by oath or affirmation that would cause a judge to believe there was probable cause to issue a warrant, then no warrant can issue. So these capious warrants in these municipal courts, they're not really warrants, which is why when a police officer comes to your house for a capious warrant, they're not busting in the door. If you failed to appear at a traffic court, they're not going to bust in the door over a failure to appear because it's not really a real warrant. But they will nab you if you're out on the street and you're vulnerable, especially if they don't think you'll sue or they don't think you know the law. If they had a real warrant, if it's a real warrant, they will bust in your front door and they will go through your entire house and they will do whatever they need to do to look for whatever they have a warrant for. Other than that, they don't have a right to search. So even like on the side of the road, they don't have a right to search and except in very, very, very narrow circumstances. Do they have the right to actually search you on the side of the road? Because we shouldn't be subjugated or subjected to unreasonable searches and seizures. Okay, any questions on that part? Any questions on the oath or affirmation and the information and belief? Okay, now when you sign a ticket, before I get off of this, I just want to mention, when you sign a ticket on the side of the road, you're making a promise to appear. So now you've contracted. You can't go around breaking your contracts. So I do not suggest that you sign a ticket and then don't show up. You're going to have a problem and an issue with that court. So I don't recommend that you do that. If you sign a ticket and you promise to appear, then you need to appear. Which is why I don't sign tickets. Okay, Amendment 5. Grand jury double jeopardy, self-incrimination, and due process. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless a presentment or indictment of a grand jury except in cases arising in land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Now, again, this thing says a lot, doesn't it? This says an awful lot here. So, this first part is saying, unless it's a military issue, arising in the land or naval forces or militia when in actual time of war or public danger, okay? So, other than military stuff, no person shall be held to answer for a crime unless a presentment or indictment of a grand jury. So, what they have to do is go to a grand jury. The evidence gets laid out to a grand jury. The grand jury puts up an indictment, and then that indictment is taken to a judge. A judge issues a warrant to have you come in and answer to this indictment. And then now you have some real actual charges against you. So that's how the criminal thing gets going. You have to have, first a complaint, and then that complaint goes to the grand jury, and then the grand jury makes an indictment, and then you're charged with a crime, and then a warrant gets issued, and then, then you gotta go answer for your supposed crimes. Now, when that happens, you're still innocent until proven guilty. So, they have to prove that you committed the crime. You don't have to prove that you didn't. But oftentimes they do try to make you prove that you didn't. So, the next part of that is double jeopardy. Nor shall any, I'll show you starting here, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy of life or limb. So, we've probably all heard something about double jeopardy. What that means is, once you're acquitted of a crime, and acquitted means you're found guilty, you're found innocent. So, if a judge or a jury finds you innocent, they can't bring you back up on those same charges again, trying to prove it again that you're guilty. That's double jeopardy. Nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself. And that's, you've heard people talk about pleading the fifth. That's what they're talking about. In any criminal case, you don't have to testify to anything that may incriminate you. And that's why people say, I want to plead the fifth. That means they don't want to answer that question. Now, what's interesting about pleading the fifth is that I've heard many attorneys say that, and if I'm not mistaken, there might have been a Supreme Court ruling that even mentioned it. I'll have to look that up. Maybe we'll see that on another Zoom that we do, or another video that I do. But I've heard them say that this pleading the fifth and not answering questions is sometimes even more important to an innocent person than it is to a guilty person, for various legal reasons. So, just because somebody pleads the fifth doesn't mean that they're guilty and therefore have something to hide and therefore don't want to answer. There could be lots of reasons why a person may not want to testify, and maybe they don't want their words to be twisted back on them. I mean, I don't know, but I just want to point out that pleading the Fifth Amendment is no indication of whether somebody is guilty. And, that has been stated by many attorneys. So just keep that in mind. Okay. Nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And we see this happen all the time. I myself am a victim right now. I'm in the middle of some cases where I've been deprived of property without due process of law. And that's in direct contradiction to the Fifth Amendment, and yet it's happening. So this is, again, why it's important to know these. Now, the next part and the last part of this Fifth Amendment says, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Now, that, a lot of times, attorneys will want to say, if your property was taken in a tax issue, then that's not a government takings. Government takings is only eminent domain. But that's not what the Constitution says, because we're reading it right here. This is straight out of the Constitution. This is the Constitution. This is exactly what it says. And it says, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. And it happens all the time. Also, due process. Property is taken without due process. These are direct violations of the Fifth Amendment. All of these tax seizures, a lot of these asset forfeitures. They call it asset forfeiture. So, if you get stopped, for example, in your car and they find drugs, or they cite you for a DWI or some crime, and they take and impound your car and take your property, you haven't had due process of law, and they've already taken your property. But see, people agree with that every day. It's just standard. This is what they do. This is how our society works. And I'm here to tell you that no matter how long a wrong has continued, or how many people participate in it, a wrong is a wrong. And we can clearly see here that oftentimes the government breaks all of these amendments. I'm sure as I've been talking, many of you have thought of instances where, well, wait a minute, that wasn't followed, and wait, that wasn't followed, and, I've been deprived of property without due process. And due process is one of those we're going to get into later, too, because a lot of times you think you were given due process and you weren't. So we're going to read the law on what due process is as well. So very important there. And that was the fifth one. So those are the ones we went over last week. And then we're going to continue on and see if we can get a few more in before I have to end this meeting tonight. Okay. So the Sixth Amendment has to do with criminal prosecutions. It talks about your jury trial, your right to confront your accuser, and your right to counsel. In all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial. In other words, they can't spirit you away to Gitmo and try you over there in a dank basement, with only you and the prosecutor and the judge, and convict you and slam you in a secret prison. They can't do that. You have the right to a speedy and public trial so that the public can witness what's going on. It's your right to have them witness that. And that shall be by an impartial jury of the state and district wherein the crime shall have been committed. Okay, so you're allowed an impartial jury in the area where it happened. So if you live in Texas, you're not gonna get a jury from Washington State where they don't really understand how we operate down here. You're gonna get a jury that lives in the area that you live in, that understands how our society kind of works here. We all live here, and we all understand how it works down here. Because believe me, different parts of the country operate very, very differently. And the one uniting law in this country is our Constitution. So, which district shall have been previously ascertained by law, and to be informed of the nature and cause of the accusation. So, they have to tell you what you're charged with. It can't be, oh, we think he broke some secret law we're not going to tell you about, and believe it or not, these sound like kind of silly things, but these are things that have been done to people in dictatorships and communist countries and things like that, where they don't have this Constitution, lining out the way things are supposed to go in our country, and that, nobody can violate this document. You have a right to be confronted with the witnesses against you. Okay, so he has the right to be confronted with the witnesses against him. It can't be some secret witness that he doesn't know about and he has no idea, and they just say, well, this guy Johnny said that you did. Well, wait a minute, who is that? Let me see who's saying this about me. They also have the right to a compulsory process for obtaining witnesses in his favor. So you're allowed to summon witnesses to come and testify in your favor, and to have the assistance of counsel for his defense. Now, this is another important one that gets violated an awful lot, because the courts have wanted to change this last stance of this paragraph to a bar card carrying attorney at law. But that's not what the Constitution says. The Constitution says that I can have the assistance of counsel for my defense. Yet the courts want to say that counsel has to be a bar card attorney, but that's not what the Constitution says. So again, they're trying to give us the okey doke and basically change what the law is and make it contrary to the Constitution. Because when I go in and I have my legal mentors with me for my counsel and my ADA advocate to counsel me on how to get through this without totally breaking down, and helping me with my cues to get through with my disability, a lot of times the courts will just say, no, these people we're not allowing that. And I've heard many, many stories of that happening to people. So we need to understand exactly what the Constitution says so that we can make sure that our courts run smoothly and that they operate in the interest of justice and in our favor as the civilians in this country, as the people. The courts are supposed to function for the benefit of the people. And so we shouldn't be denied our assistance of counsel just because we choose our counsel to be somebody who's not a bar card carrying attorney at law. And we can get into some of those reasons later. A lot of what we're going to do is actually go through here and look at the legal definitions of some of these words. In the first couple of lessons, what I wanted to do is just get you a little bit familiar with this document, with the Constitution, to know the format of it, the layout of it, and let's just run through and get a basic idea. And then later, we'll go more in depth and we'll actually get in and start defining all of these words so that you can get the full import of them. Because in this, one of the words we want to look up is counsel. When we look up the word counsel in a legal dictionary, it doesn't say, bar card carrying attorney. Although you could choose a bar card carrying attorney to be your counsel, that's not the sole definition of counsel. So, again, we're going to go through later, and there's a lot of words that we're going to define, and you'll be very surprised to see what some of those words actually say when you look them up in a legal dictionary. Okay. Seventh Amendment is going to talk about common law suits, jury trial. In suits at common law, where the value in controversy shall exceed $20, the right of trial by jury shall be preserved, and no fact tried by a jury shall be otherwise re-examined in any court of the United States than according to the rules of common law. So, if you've got a controversy that exceeds $20, then your right to trial by jury is always preserved, and no fact tried by jury shall be otherwise re-examined in a court other than according to the rules of common law. So, when a jury rules on something, that's pretty much it unless you move into the rules of common law. And common law is really going to operate in your favor. This is the real law of the land in this country. And a lot of us have been fooled by not understanding the different forms of law, the different jurisdictions in our court, the way those function, and the different forms of law. There's common law, there's equity law, there's maritime law, admiralty law. There's different kinds of law, and we're going to get into that and teach you about those as well. But the common law is really our greatest protector and really the basis of all law in this country. And common law is pretty simple. Common law says, don't damage me or my property, and don't break any contracts with me that damage me. So that's pretty much it. If you don't damage anybody else or their property, and you don't break any contracts, then you shouldn't have any problems. However, we've seen lots of Americans that have lots of problems, and they haven't damaged anyone or their property, and they haven't broken any contracts. So this is very important. Lots of issues that people are having to deal with that they really shouldn't. And once we all understand the law and we all begin to stand up for ourselves and for our neighbors, things are going to get a lot better in this country. So that's why we do these free law classes. We want to show you where the law is. We're not attorneys. We don't give legal advice. What we do is we show you in black and white what the law says. We also show you and look up those words in the legal dictionaries, and we point out to you points of the law and places in the law that might be of help to you. We can also help guide you as lay people on sometimes how to fill out forms or things like that. And we're real happy to do that here at Lay Law. We're going to look at the 8th Amendment now. And the 8th Amendment deals with excess bail or fines, cruel and unusual punishment. Excess bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. So, I think a lot of us have heard this before about, no excessive bail and cruel and unusual punishment. Been some interesting rulings on those things as well that we'll go over later. The 9th Amendment is the non-enumerated rights. Remember, I told you our rights are God-given, but the Constitution enumerates some of them. But what about the ones that haven't been enumerated? So it says the enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. For example, it doesn't say in the Constitution that I have a right to get married and have a family, but we pretty much all understand that I do. Just because it doesn't say it in the Constitution doesn't give anybody any right to deny me those rights that are not enumerated. In other words, it's just telling you, just because it doesn't say it here doesn't mean you don't retain all of your rights. And the last one in what's called the Bill of Rights, which is our 10th Amendment, is rights reserved to the states or the people. Here again, the Constitution is again going to telling the government that, look, just because something's not specifically delegated doesn't give you a workaround. So what it actually says is the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So, in other words, it's saying any power that we did not give to the United States by the Constitution, we reserve all of those and you can't usurp them. The government is only allowed to do what we tell it can do in this document. And as I said, we're going to go back over this entire document. It's just that a lot of people have, they talk about their rights, and so that's what I wanted to start with, about what our rights are and what the Bill of Rights says about that. Now, that doesn't mean that's all the Constitution says about our rights. Again, like I said, there are several others, and we're gonna look over these as well. But let's look at the ones in particular. Let's look at, I had spoken before about the 14th, saying, that it also was about due process and about law. And it talks about privileges and immunities, due process, equal protection, and then it goes on to talk about apportionment of representatives and Civil War disqualification and debt. So we do have some more here about due process, equal protection, and privileges and immunities that we want to be sure and reference, because, you know, the Constitution specifically mentions property several times. And again, here is one of those places in the 14th Amendment, Section 1. It talks about, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. So that's the second time we've seen them say you can't be deprived of property without due process of law. Nor deprive any person within its jurisdiction of the equal protection of laws. In other words, they can't give judges and cops protections under the law that they don't give me. They can't give, senators and representatives protections that they don't give me. This is what is super important about having a republic as opposed to having a democracy. In a republic, we operate by laws here, and this says, no state shall deprive any person. That means anyone. That means it protects every single individual from the loss of their property without due process of law. Now, when you're in a democracy, they could just vote that away because it's a democracy. So they could just have a vote and say, well, we don't like this anymore because we want to take Julie's property. And they could just vote it away. That's what a democracy is. Which is why we have our legislators and presidents who, often have a vested interest in depriving you of your property, standing up saying all the time, we have to spread democracy. We have to spread democracy. We have to protect our democracy. Well, guess what, folks? We do not have a democracy in this country. This is not a democracy. We have a democratic way of voting. So we do vote democratically, but we are not a democracy. We are a republic. And if you'll remember back to when you said your Pledge of Allegiance, it told you that right in your pledge. Many people go right past that. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which is, and they don't even stop. They keep right on going and don't realize what they just said. And to the republic for which it stands. It doesn't say, and for the democracy for which it stands, because we're not a democracy. We're a republic, which is a good thing for us, because a republic is run by the rule of law, and that's what we want in this country. All we want is for our legislators and supposed law enforcement officers to actually follow the law. That would be great. So, if we want them to and we want to hold them accountable, then what we're going to have to do is know what it says, first of all, and know where it says that. So when all of our citizenry know that, we'll have a much easier time. I can tell you, when they know that you know, and they will test you every bit, every step of the way. They will test you to see if you really know. It's not enough to stand up and scream, I know my rights, and think that it's going to get you anywhere. You better not only know your rights, you better know your founding documents for your country, you better know your Constitution, and that means all of it, not just the Bill of Rights, because as I've shown you right here, you better have your nose in this 14th Amendment as well. But you need to know not only that, but you need to understand at least how to find codes that you need to find or Supreme Court rulings that you may need to find to help you back up your case. And we're going to teach you all of that stuff here. We're going to start with our founding documents like we're doing right here, and we are going to continue on and skim through the rest of this document in our first Passover, and then we're going to go back, like I said, and in depth go over each of these and make sure that we know what every word says. You need to look up all of these words in your legal dictionary because they don't always mean the same in legalese as they mean in English. They're two different languages, two different nomenclatures. So that's important to remember. Okay, so that was my goal tonight, to get through the last 5 of the Bill of Rights, and we've done that. So when we come back next time, we can start going over this actual outline that we're looking at up here. We're probably not going to spend a whole lot of time on this because there are lots of other excellent Constitution classes already out there. I'm not a reinvent the wheel kind of girl. I just want to go over this stuff with you guys, make sure you get the highlights, make sure that you know where to get the information and how to look it up, how to look up your words in a legal dictionary and that kind of stuff. So we're not going to go real in depth over this, but we are going to go over it a little bit. There are some things that need to be pointed out in the whole document. And everybody needs to know this entire document. As I said, this is the basis, the foundation of law in this country. So it's real important that we understand these founding documents, because what's happened in this country is they've infringed on this so much and so often that it's just normal in this country to go against the Constitution and violate people's rights. And we need to make that not normal anymore. And the only way we're going to do that is to get educated, to get armed, and to know how to fight these people back. It starts with the education and then making some really tough choices about what battles anybody may want to fight. Now, a lot of people that come here have unfortunately already been victims of it, and so they need to find where is their remedy in law. And that's what we're going to be showing you, how to find all that stuff, where to find all that stuff. And as I said, we'll do our very best to guide you. I'm going to be bringing some of my counselors on. We'll be having them as guest speakers, and then we'll also have them, as soon as we can get geared up, we'll have them available for consultations so that you have the shortest learning curve and it takes you the shortest amount of time to go through and understand the law. Things that have taken me and my counselors many years and many decades to learn, we want to give you all that experience so you don't have that long learning curve. And just for anybody who may be interested, my long-term goal with lay law is to make it ubiquitous in society, like, the Red Cross or Girl Scouts. This is not a money-making venture for me. I don't make any money off of this. This is a project of the Church of Works. And I just want to get it established and then, hand it off, honestly, to somebody that I think will continue to run it in a good fashion and continue to teach any and everybody. Because honestly, the stuff we're teaching, everybody should have known before they graduated high school. Everything we're going to teach you here, they should have known by the time they graduated high school. Now, if I had one class where everybody, all the students came in at one time and left at one time, I could teach you everything you need to know and function in society, everything you need to know about the law and how to find what you need about the law. I could teach you all of that in what would probably be equivalent to one semester of school. But since we have people coming in and out and at different levels and will be stopped and asked questions, it may not go that fast as we begin to get more and more people come in on these calls. So, as a supplement, I'm making additional videos that you can go and look at, and then we're going to, like I said, make our counselors available so you can actually make appointments and call and speak with them about your personal issues. That's the goal here, and hopefully everybody will invite other people and invite them to our YouTube channel, our Lay Law YouTube channel, to watch our videos there and learn the law. And I'm trying to produce those and throw up documents in a place where you can all access them just as fast as I can. And so hopefully we'll be getting more and more and more data to you as fast as we can, and we'll educate the public, and we'll stop seeing some of the violations against the people that we've been seeing. Sound good?
Thank you so much.
You're very, very welcome. And
Okay.
so if nobody has any more questions, I'll go ahead and end off tonight. Keep in mind, guys, too, as we increase with participants, as we get more and more people coming in, I'm going to start doing some giveaways. And I'm going to do some pretty incredible giveaways. I'm talking body cams, dash cams, drones, books, all kinds of awesome stuff. So be sure and invite your friends, because when we get a good number in, I'll start doing the giveaways.
Okay, sounds great.
All right, awesome. Thank you guys for coming, and we'll see you next week.
All right, thanks so much.
All righty, bye-bye.
All right, take care. Bye.